will call our meeting to order tonight. Renata, if you do the roll call, please.
Gookin,
Yes, him here, yeah.
Miller. Here. English.
Here?
Evans.
Here.
Ettinger.
Here.
McEvers.
Here.
If we would rise for the invocation, we have Pastor Paul Peabody with the Grace Bible Church with us tonight.
Dear God in heaven, we thank you for the great privilege it is to live in a city called Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. You have blessed us with natural beauty, with plentiful resources, and with wonderful people. You've also blessed us with a mayor and council that want to do what is right and good and healthy for the people who live here. And we ask that you would give to them tonight your wisdom and your insight with the business that is on the agenda. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ, whose birthday we will celebrate next week. Amen.
Woody, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we don't have any amendments to the agenda tonight, so we'll move on to the public comment portion. Anyone that wishes to come up and address council on city business shall have 3 minutes to do so.
Good evening. My name is David Lyons. The Health Corridor Report. Parkwood and Kootenai have a big problem with land assembling numerous small parcels into a large footprint for a building. They have to get all the parcels in the footprint, and people are holding out for more money. Kootenai Hospital District, the legal owner of hospital properties and the entity involved here, is a governmental entity with the power of eminent domain, which it could use to get all the properties it wants for what a court determines is a fair price. It apparently doesn't want to do that, bad publicity, I suppose, so all it can do is overpay. John Ness spoke to the Ignite board and was asked exactly what Kootenai wants Ignite to do. His answer, a new district would, quote, use its financing to assemble land, unquote. How? Ignite has fewer tools than Kootenai. Ignite doesn't have eminent domain in this situation anymore. The legislature took that away from urban renewal agencies in 2007 after Kelo. So all Ignite can do is overpay, which Kootenai can do. But Kootenai prefers that the taxpayers do the overpaying. And once an urban renewal agency owns property, it can transfer it to a public body on any terms it wants, with or without consideration. Without consideration means free. And guess who's a public body? The definition says any governmental entity, including, quote, any district, such as Kootenai Hospital District. So Kootenai overpays for properties, so Ignite overpays for properties Kootenai wants, then gives or sells them to Kootenai cheap. The taxpayers pay for it all. And Parkwood? Mr. Ness spoke of public-private partnerships. That means Ignite overpays for properties Parkwood wants and sells them to it. Must be at fair value, but Ignite alone determines what that is. A friendly appraiser gives a low appraisal. Parkwood gets the properties not free, but cheap. The taxpayers pay the rest. You know the written plan Ignite will send you will be so general and so nonspecific, it will allow all this. Do you really want to run for re-election on this kind of corporate welfare?
Anyone else I'd like to invite to come up?
Takes me a minute, sorry.
That's okay.
Susie Snedeker. Good evening, Mayor, Council. David said some of the things I'm going to say. Good job, Dave. But regarding the proposed new urban renewal district, I'm asking you to consider the following. Have the owners of the affected properties been notified of this proposal? Although I'm concerned for all properties, the owners must be informed of both the pros and the cons of inclusion in the new area. Should they not have a right to be informed? Granted, this is not a quasi-judicial issue, but it is something to think. Those people count. They're taxpayers. I'd like to read a paragraph, and I'm going to run over a little bit today, sorry. This is paragraph 2, page 18. Kootenai Health and large-scale developers have both had great difficulty with price gougers and other property owners with inflated profit expectations. The prospect of creating a higher density, more efficient, and PBB-oriented campus is being obstructed. It appears that a significant number of property owners can hold out for higher prices longer than Kootenai Health can afford to wait for asking prices to come down to levels that make development viable. I want you to think about that paragraph. If you approve this tonight, you're approving that verbiage and that notion. Price gougers. What happened to private property rights? And what happened to the right to determine the asking price for one's property? That's appalling. And we paid for this study. Worse. I would note that urban renewal, the eminent domain issue was discussed with David. A large majority of the properties are the result of haphazard development, which was approved by the city and no doubt the developer. Poor planning is the responsibility of the developer. They developed what they wanted and now expect the taxpayers to clean up their errors and omissions. As you are aware, property taxes are increasing, particularly in the city. Before you vote, please ascertain the exact amounts that will be siphoned from the taxing districts by the new district. Then multiply that by the number of years the district will be in existence. We, the taxpayers, are increasingly burdened. Think of the impact this would have on the city budget alone when this money is siphoned. In closing, while I do not understand the hospital's fear of takeover or competition, I suppose it exists, although I doubt that the bigger is better mindset is particularly viable. The majority of funding seems to be directed toward privately owned properties that someone thinks should be improved. Maybe a boutique this, boutique that, in the case of the houses, or wants to acquire. Isn't that the responsibility of the property owner rather than the taxpayers? Is it something about corporate welfare after all? Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Teva Orjula, thank you for your time tonight. So I was down in the park 2-3 weeks ago doing a photo shoot, and I was walking along the beach, and I looked down at the sand, and I just kept noticing these little casings, and I've given you guys each a photo of them. I took some pictures of them. And I didn't think much of it first when I saw 3 or 4, but then, I kept walking all the way down from the peninsula where the tree is there. And I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And so I started thinking to myself, I was like, how could these have gotten washed up on the beach? And then it just dawned on me that Friday had been the fireworks show. And they're all melted, so it was pretty clear that it was something that had been on fire. So I contacted KEA, and they called the resort and asked them if they knew anything about it, and they didn't get a response. and the city sent some people down there to clean them up. But I just thought it was worth bringing to your attention with a couple of questions. First, just was anyone aware that this was happening? Either the city, Hagedorn, or the firework company? Possibly there was a new type of firework, or no one was made aware that these were being put in the lake. You know, I'm really curious if the city has a policy as to whether we're allowed to dump plastic in the lake during fireworks shows. My next question is, will this be allowed to happen again? Is there anything we can do to make sure that we're not putting these in the lake? The press did go down there and get some quotes from, I can't remember who they got quotes from, but I guess that we let off 4,500 of these on that evening, so technically there could be 4,500 of these melted casings in the lake, and if they were all the way down the front of the lake, they must have gone down the river. They're probably on Tubbs Hill, and I just think that that's a problem. Yeah, so are there any laws in the books for pollution of fireworks? Or, you know, I'm curious about that, which I'm not expecting answers tonight, but it is food for thought. And when we find out about this, will there be a fine imposed for this littering? Because I did Google, you know, Idaho Coeur d'Alene littering laws, and basically if I walked out the front of the library and there's a cop standing there and I threw this very casing on the ground, I could be fined $1,000, possibly 6 months in jail and 40 hours litter cleanup. So I just leave you with that to think about, and I don't know if I'll hear from you or if
You know, so I'll just respond and appreciate you looking out after our lake.
Sure,
Right? It's
thanks.
one of our most valuable assets that we have. And here's the information, and I worked with Bill Greenwood on this, and Bill Greenwood's staff did go down there and pick up a number of these objects. I was told that this was a product that had never been used before. It was used this time. The resort was unaware of it. Obviously, the city was unaware of it. I was told that this was of some type of firework that came down on the water and then exploded on the water, and that's what was the result of these casings. I've been told that this product will never be used again. It was an error on the vendor's part. The resort did send their crew down every day for a number of days to follow back up and pick up anything that was on the beach.
but that was only after they were made aware of it, because I went on Monday, so that was 4 days.
Well, as soon as they were made aware, as soon as anybody was made aware of it, then it was responded to.
So basically,
Because
I
this
guess-
is something that hasn't happened before.
Right, so the firework company is kind of where the buck ends, I guess.
So they were the ones, I don't believe that from the people that I know from the resort would have thought that this was a good idea.
Yeah,
They just wouldn't have. And so this was, I believe, a one-time occurrence. The vendor has told them that this will not happen again. And from there, I mean, at some point in time, you have to take some of these people at their word until maybe it happens again. Then their word isn't so good. But we've been told that this was a one-off and will not happen again.
cool, so I can put this to bed in my mind. If it does happen again, would there be a fine imposed on that vendor?
I would
for
say,
littering?
I would say yes. There'll be, if it happens again, there would be consequences.
Wonderful, thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay.
Kiki?
I just wanted to say that I appreciate when folks bring this up. Thank you for doing it, because it brings the importance of it to the public's attention in a more clear way, and there's some documentation of what the comments were and what the public expects out of responsible vendors. So I just appreciate your time in doing that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else wishing to have public comment? Come on up.
Mayor Widmeyer, councilors, Patty Shea of Vista Utilities, 1735 North 15th Street. And I came to do two things. One, I wanted to introduce you to my successor, Todd Kisby. I'll be retiring at the end of the year after 39 years with Avista. So I wanted to introduce Todd. Todd's a local boy. He does the same job I do in eastern Washington and around Spokane and some other areas. So he's a great fit. He's who I wanted to be in this position. I've been working on that for about 4 years. So you're going to be left in really good hands, and he lives here locally. So I wanted to introduce you to Todd. And then I also just wanted to thank you very much for all the interactions I've had representing Avista with you, and the respect that you've given us, the time that you take to listen to all of our concerns, and you really treat us like neighbors. And I just want to tell you I really appreciate that. So that's all I wanted to do tonight.
So Patty, we wanted to thank you for all of the work that you've done and with Jobs Plus and all the other organizations you've been involved with. You've been a pleasure to work with. And I have one question, what are you going to do now?
Oh, actually, I'm going to keep working, just doing the things Avista used to let me do sometimes, so I'm going to do some consulting work. I've done some internally with the company, and so I like the tough things, so that's what I'm going to start doing in the community.
So you'll still be involved in the community?
Yes, you'll see me a lot.
Well, that's good, that's
Yeah,
good
so,
news.
anyway, so thank you all very, very much.
And welcome,
Appreciate it.
Todd. Anyone else wishing to give public comment tonight? Okay, so we will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement tonight? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to make a comment regarding, it was actually funny because Tuovo, who was just here, I read an article that he had written today. I read the article today, but he'd written it before, and it was regarding the land south of City Hall that Ignite owns, and the swap that took place that council pre-approved a while ago, and it was against that going on. And I think I would like to restate what I stated at that meeting so many years ago, is that I feel that, that there shouldn't be a swap, that the trail should stay the same, we should preserve our green spaces, and that this property south of City Hall will go to the city once the Lake District expires in 2021, at which time I think we could use it to expand Tubbs Hill. So seeing him here just made me think of that, so I thought I would bring that up.
Okay. The land swap portion of that that's off the table.
And that's good to hear. So I would say just moving forward that, and I've also talked, remember I went to a thing where they donated, Riverstone donated that chunk of land by the trail. And I know that Councilman English and Councilman Miller were there. And I think they both expressed the same thing, that probably want to keep that. If I'm speaking out of turn, please let me know. They want to keep that in the trail, keep that city property, and keep the property south of Tubbs Hill. I think that's kind of the will of council, unless anyone wants to disagree with me there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. I had just one thing, is probably 8 weeks or so ago, I went to a meeting with Troy. He has a meeting with all of the department heads, and I attended that meeting, and I gave the department heads a challenge to come back with ideas on improving service and any efficiencies in their department, something that we could work on. And I got tremendous responses from everyone, and so I gave everyone a copy of this for your holiday reading pleasure. But there really is some fantastic ideas that our department heads have come up with. So I wanted just to give that to you, have a chance to digest it, and we will come back and we will discuss it. But every department put in ideas on how to improve their service and how to just make what they do more efficient. So I was very, very pleased with the ideas, and I think you will too. And somewhere down the road, sometime this spring, we will probably have a workshop in regards to all of these items brought forward. But I just wanted to share that with you. Some really great work on our department heads' part, so I wanted to thank them. So that's all that I had, and then we will move on to consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of the consent calendar as presented, including Resolution 18064.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Renata.
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yeah.
English,
Yes.
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans. Yes.
Motion carried. Under other business, we have the presentation of the Health Corridor Eligibility Report. I have property in this proposed project, and so I'm going to recuse myself as I did previously on any discussion. On any discussion in the future, I will recuse myself as well. And so I'm going to turn this over to Council President McEvers. It's all yours.
Thanks, bud.
I'll take a break.
Oh, let's just take a break now. All right, moving ahead. Hillary, give us kind of where we're going with this, because this is a strange one.
All
Seems
right.
strange, yeah.
Yes, I figured it would be helpful to give a little bit of background and perspective. So good evening, council. So before I hand this over to Panhandle Area Council for the formal presentation, just wanted to give a little background to you and those in the audience and those watching from home, why we're even looking at a health corridor eligibility report this evening. So if you remember, earlier this year, there was a report prepared by the Urban Land Institute for the health corridor, and it was the TAP report, so the technical assistance one, and that was facilitated by CDA 2030. And so really looking at what's going on in the area of Kootenai Health and the other medical facilities and some of the surrounding neighborhoods, just trying to figure out what's going on there and what are some recommendations for moving forward, how the area can grow and what can be achieved for that health corridor as we're naming it. So that happened earlier, came to you on June 19th and did a presentation and proposed going forward with eligibility reports for both the health corridor and for East Sherman. And if you recall, there was a little concern and some confusion from the council, and you asked for some more information. So we slowed it down, came back on August 7th for a workshop. So we had the workshop, we had city staff speak, we had CDA 2030 representatives and Kootenai Health, and then we also had Ignite here to help answer questions, just to talk about what does it even entail? You know, what is this health corridor? What are we looking at? Why would we look at eligibility report? And so if you recall, the council voted to support moving forward with Kootenai Health paying for that and kind of taking the lead versus it being initiated by someone else. And so they did that. They worked with CDA 2030. Kootenai Health and some other partners paid for that work to be done, and they hired Panhandle Area Council, and that was done under a contract with CDA 2030. So PAC prepared the report. They did a lot of research. We'll let them speak to that this evening, but the report was prepared and distributed last week, so you all had copies of that in advance. They're also scheduled to present tomorrow to Ignite, so kind of follow up to this evening, as that was part of the contract. And the other unique thing about this request this evening is not only a presentation, but we are including a resolution. And so we're asking for City Council to accept the eligibility report and to direct Ignite to take the next steps, and that is to prepare an urban renewal plan. Same process we had for Atlas. So it's doing a master plan and financial feasibility. So it's not guaranteeing that an urban renewal district will be formed. It's really taking the next step to evaluate it. So Tom and Wally will talk to you this evening about how this area is eligible and what are some of the challenges, deficiencies, issues with growth and development in here. And so the next step is really diving into that. What are the uses that should take place? How should this area be developed and intensified? And then how could the tax increment fund that? How would that work? So that's really kind of the critical part. You'll have other chances to weigh in on this. So wanted to bring that to you. Also want to remind the public, so we do have the 2 existing districts. So we have the Lake District, that'll expire in 2021. The River District, I don't remember the expiration.
2027.
Thank you, 2027. And then we're forming the new Atlas District, so we have that. We also, this evening, have not only Panhandle Area Council to present, but we have representatives from Kootenai Health, from CDA 2030, and Ignite that are available to answer questions. We really just want you to have a level of comfort and understanding of what does this eligibility report say, and what are your questions about the next step. So I will conclude my part and turn it over to Panhandle Area Council. I'm pleased to introduce Wally Jacobson, Executive Director, and he will turn it over after he says some words to Tom Hudson. So,
Hillary, just
Yes.
one question real quick. So I'm reading this resolution saying it's about relating deterioration to the code, and then it looks like it's moving forward. Commence and complete the preparation of urban renewal plans. Am I reading that wrong, or is that the reason?
The urban renewal language, and after Tom concludes his presentation, if you still have questions, we might want to bring Danielle up, Danielle Quaid, to help answer and kind of give you any assurance of that. But basically, an urban renewal plan entails doing those steps, the master planning and financial feasibility. And then Tom will talk about the deteriorating areas and what that all means.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, President McKivers and council members. I'm Wally Jacobson, the Executive Director of Panhandle Area Council. I'm about to lose my voice, suffering from a cold. But late September, PAC was hired by Coeur d'Alene 2030 to conduct an eligibility report, which we're going to discuss tonight. Over the last 6 to 8 weeks, Tom and I have had a number of meetings with city staff, which we do appreciate the time that they spent. And we'll get into the details in just a minute, but I think you're aware that PAC has a pretty extensive history with urban renewal. In the form we've used Nancy Mabel and John Austin. For this study, we selected Tom Hudson, who we have worked with in the past over probably the last 20, 25 years, but he also has an extensive experience in urban renewal. But we just thought we'd change it up a little bit, and with that, I will turn it over to Tom Hudson.
Mr. President, members of the council, good evening, and thank you for your time and attention this evening. Before I begin, I'd just like to briefly say thank you for your public service. I am a new resident of your community. I'm a native of Moscow and fifth generation from Latah County. I've known Coeur d'Alene as your neighbor for many years, and I just moved here with my wife and my adult daughter and joined my two brothers in Coeur d'Alene, and I consider it truly a privilege to be living here. So I say that very heartfelt. Thank you for your service. Now to the report. It's been noted earlier this year by local press that Coeur d'Alene is the fastest growing city in the fastest growing state in the nation. And this growth brings with it a great deal of challenge, as you know better than any others. This is a time of change, growth, and adjustment. One of the city's greatest assets is the Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor. For someone who now is in his 38th year in community development, both as a consultant and as a public servant, I can say that quite often I have found the opposite of what's going on here in Coeur d'Alene. And that is that independent community hospitals have been on the decline. The numbers are dramatic nationwide. This is an extremely severe situation for independent community hospitals in the way that technology has changed and servicing and economy and expectations in the public. It's been very, very hard on independent community hospitals. Nevertheless, in that context, your Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor has had truly remarkable success. In my personal experience, unprecedented. It's the largest employer in the county at 3,200 people and growing rapidly. It has an average wage of over $58,000 per year, not including the physicians in the organization. And it too is growing substantially. In fact, you know, the average third world country grows at a rate of about 2.5% a year. So when you talk about higher rates than that, it's quite remarkable. I worked extensively in Meridian some years ago while it was the fastest growing in the nation at 12%. So these numbers mean a lot to me. So take this for example to consider. When Coeur d'Alene grew by 20% between 2000 and 2010, Kootenai Health staff grew by 44%. In 2010 to 2017, the city grew by about 15%, while Kootenai Health grew by 71%. These are truly remarkable findings, and it's a result, I think, of something that was really unpredictable in the 20th century when the groundwork was laid back, I think, in 1956 when the hospital was initiated, and under the then current land use regulations and infrastructure and so on, they didn't have the expectation of this kind of growth. So it has happened, and it has happened in a very big way. And now, as noted by the Urban Land Institute, its growth is now highly constrained. So you see this dramatic increase for some time, and now it's grown into limitations that were set in a system that had expectations for the 20th century. This is not a 20th century kind of operation. As you know, the Kootenai Health has expressed for over 10 years that it wanted to grow from a very successful local community hospital to a regional medical center that can compete with the likes of the Spokane Regional Medical Center complex that's there. The ULI report is quite remarkable in its various findings and consistent with what we have found ourselves.
See, could I ask a question, Woody? Go ahead. When you talk about these percentages of growth, is that
In
budget
staff.
or staff?
Staff, yes, sir.
Okay.
It was the most straightforward apples-to-apples comparison that I could find. Population of the community, population of staff within the hospital. Thank you for that question, sir, and for the clarification. So, how does an organization and how does that Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor maintain its competitiveness? These are significant issues, how it moves forward into the future to continue to serve the community as it does, to serve the county as it does, and be an important part of your future. One of the key findings that we heard from any number of specialists was that the constraints on the corridor are such that Kootenai Health will be forced to locate its future growth in other areas and almost certainly outside of Coeur d'Alene. Now that's one of our realities that we need to face in all of this. So as we looked at the various challenges, many of which you've heard about, as has been noted just a few moments ago, one of the key issues is capital costs. And how are those capital costs addressed? Tonight we're here to talk about one specific potential resource, and that is through urban renewal, tax increment financing, also sometimes called revenue allocation financing. It's one of the, and again, in my world of community development, it's one of the very few tools available to us in Idaho. I've worked in every region of the state.
Really, could you name the rest?
Pardon me,
So
sir?
you say that's the only tool available?
No, sir. One of the very few tools.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
how many are there? I mean, if you're going to say this is one of very few tools, I'm going to call BS on that, because this is a taxing district. They can raise property taxes. They have bonding authority. Now, as a city, we also have, we do property taxes. We have bonding authority. We get money from the state. So when you say something like that, you're going to have to back it up.
I would be happy to follow. Well, thank you first for your comment. And, I join with you in trying to get to insight. So I am encouraged by your challenge to the point. I would be happy to follow up with you, all of you, and provide you a secondary review of the kinds of resources that are out there. But I can say with total peace of mind and heart that in all of my years here in this state and in the 15 total that I've worked in, urban renewal and tax increment financing. By the way, I am a certified Main Street manager, one of the first 12 in the nation, and also a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. So, and I want to share that with you so that you know I too share the importance of a word with you. And so again, I have found limited resources for this kind of problem when you've got the infrastructure issues, public need, demand, the interests of the community as a whole, as well as a variety of private sector, nonprofits, and institutions and agencies such as you find there. This is a difficult one. So, but I will follow up with you on that.
Now?
I would prefer to give you a thoughtful, lengthy review.
When?
Soon.
Well, should I motion to table this until you're ready?
I can't answer that question for you. that would be your
Back to that.
All
your
right,
privilege.
Yeah.
we'll come back to it.
Write that down somewhere, would you? Thanks. You hit a sore spot there.
Yes, sir, I understand that. And I, by the way, you know, being native Idahoan, I've been in a lot of places where there are these kinds of concerns. So again, I applaud your concern and your question, and I will do my best to be responsive to all of you. So, returning to the position that I hold, tax increment financing is one of the limited kinds of tools that we have. Now, it can only be used under a number of very specific conditions. As you know, in the report that we presented, we have provided the state laws, the two statutes that are, and chapters that are relevant. And those speak to about 30 different causes and about 20 different effects that need to be found to exist in a number of combinations to determine eligibility for further pursuit of an urban renewal plan for potential urban renewal projects. So as Hillary was saying earlier this evening, there's a series of steps that would happen. Tonight, it's only, do the conditions of eligibility exist? If they do, it would then be up ultimately to you through a series of steps to determine whether or not you want to go further with a plan. And then that plan would identify pros and cons of different alternative courses of action, including feasibility, and so on. So there's a very limited scope for tonight. And as was noted, CDA 2030 hired Panhandle Area Council to answer the question. Now, to get to the answers, the work that we did included physical site surveys, physical presence, that is, quite a number of times, being in and around buildings, looking at infrastructure and so on. We reviewed available research and had about almost 20 interviews with subject matter experts and people from the public sector, from institutions, Kootenai Health and so on, and in the private sector. Now, very quickly, I'd like to give an orientation to the district. As you see with the red boundaries here, it has a number of corners to it, but basically it's bounded on the west by Northwest Boulevard, on the north by I-90, and to a small degree Apple Way, Government Way on the east, Davidson Avenue on the south, and then a very important corridor in it is the Ironwood Drive through more or less the center. And you'll see here a very sharp kind of S-turn in the middle of the corridor that will help with the discussion here shortly. Okay. Now, in brief, in the context of the Idaho statutes, we identified 8 findings that demonstrate eligibility. There's a necessity to find one. The answer to the question of eligibility for us is that urban renewal is a clear yes. Now, the report provides a much more substantial set of details on why we found the things the way we did, but I wanted to provide you with a bit of an overview. The first item that we identified is something that is, I think, common discussion around the community in lots of days of the week and times, and that's inadequate street layout. As you know, there are 3, I'm going to see if I can go backwards here. There are 3 intersections here, one at Ironwood and Northwest Boulevard, another one at Lakewood and Northwest Boulevard, and then over at Lincoln Way, US 95 and Ironwood, that are very regularly at what transportation specialists call a level of service F. Now, that's not an average every day, but keep in mind that 3 times a day in a 24-hour period, you've got 3 shifts of people. There's 700 people coming and going, 700 leaving, 700 coming in to the district, at the very least to Kootenai Health. With that and other traffic, including over 30,000 cars or vehicles, average daily traffic per day, those are highly stressed access locations. Now, what goes with that is risk, danger, safety issues. Among other things, over time, as traffic continues to increase, you're seeing more and more backup. And at certain times of the day, people can be held up at length trying to get in, coming off of I-90, for example, or coming down 95. Combined with the external circulation, internal circulation has quite a number of problems. The S kind of curve here and the rambling routes create sight distance problems that are pretty remarkable. We've had, the last report I have available to me is 261 accidents between 2012 and 2015 within the Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor. That's substantial by city staff, KMPO inputs. That's higher than average areas, the other similar areas around the city, and it affects pedestrians, cyclists, and automobiles. Now, I know one of your questions may be, what about this Medina and Ironwood improvement that's happened recently? That was primarily, my understanding, to be focused on improving the intersection. But as you see, it didn't really change this curve. In all my years in working in transportation, sight distance is one of the key issues that's out there for people. And there's also the issue of the width of the corridor that pedestrians and cyclists have to cross. This is a very challenging area. There's no question about it. And if you look at the accidents that are on the maps that we included, they're happening all over that area. It's not just one cluster. It's not just one intersection. You know, as people are accelerating and decelerating, and they're looking at the wide variety of activities there, motions of vehicles, people coming out, going in, bicyclists and so on, they don't have very much time to react, and there are so many side streets coming into the main arterial that it's particularly tough for people to move in, through, and to the area. Parking.
Before you move on.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys have any questions in regards to traffic? We're going to just scrape this along as we go. You guys good?
No, I live through it every day, so.
Right.
And, again, we're not here to plan tonight. We're just talking about existing conditions that are challenges. And a plan, if you were to follow up with it, would look at these kinds of issues and identify alternatives that might be viable to address them. Parking is often,
I'll do a follow-up on traffic, and you may address it later. If the borders, including the interchange and on the north side of I-90, were to address some of the ingress, egress to this district, or is that a traffic topic?
If I understand you, you're talking about getting it up here into this district? Mm-hmm. Yes, and I didn't go into that because that would be part of a planning, or let's say an alternative solution to dealing with it, but yes, I understand that there is some discussion about ways to identify other means to get north and south than having to take this circuitous route to the two main bottlenecks on Northwest and on Lincoln Way.
So I would ask along those lines, then, the way the line is drawn has to do with traffic, correct? The district itself.
The way this district is drawn, yeah, my organization, Panhandle Area Council, was not involved in setting up the boundaries.
Okay.
But my sense is, just speaking from Tom Hudson's seat on this, that this is a very insightful possibility that raises potential solutions to quite a difficult problem.
And Davidson, the same on the south.
Here and here.
And further down
Oh,
Davidson.
further down. My understanding is that the city is working right now on the 95, 90-degree turn, and there will be something coming on that issue in the near future. It's slightly outside the corridor.
It's pretty far south of there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And I would say it has nevertheless a residual impact on people's decisions on which way they want to come in and go out. In the same way where any of us who came up Northwest Boulevard and wanted to think about getting off of it and taking a left on the 95. You know how difficult that is. So it has that spillover impact. It's what do people perceive as their best route to get through and to. And as a matter of fact, I think it's one of the reasons why we're seeing more accidents on Emma and Davidson, because people are trying to sneak. What's a better way to get out of here? It's tough to wait a long time at intersections. Did that address?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Might come up again.
All right, thank you. I was saying that parking is often full and difficult. I understand from quite a number of interviews that people who will remain in the district but go to another area within the district will get back in their cars and drive a very short distance rather than walk. So the very people who are the customers in there become part of the challenge, part of the congestion. Whereas if the parking issues combined with circulation and internal design could address those, you might see a reduction in the overall congestion that's there. So centralized parking structures have been talked a lot about, and I think that's the reason why. And again, traffic continues to grow. Right. So that's internal street layouts resulting in economic underdevelopment and impairing solid growth. I also, at the same time, mentioned unsafe conditions. That was item number 2. I won't carry on with that anymore, just emphasizing 261 accidents, sight distance and congestion, and pedestrian bicycle disconnects. The area is not well connected to regional trails or other neighborhoods or what have you, so the combination of street layout and safety are substantial. Third item is obsolete buildings. Now that I think a lot of people would say, well, how are they obsolete? They look reasonable, some of these structures, but you have to think in the context of what is the 21st century land use need? What are the synergies that are required to make a regional medical center operate well? And they're not single practitioner, single building, and redundancies of parking and side lots and all that sort of thing working well. It doesn't fit in the medical pay system. It doesn't fit for efficiency for customers. There are all kinds of problems with a very low density situation such as we have. So the buildings that are there, they may be workable for some things, but they're not great for a 21st century regional medical center. And that's that functional obsolescence for moving into the 21st century, remaining competitive is a very important issue.
Okay, so here's where you lose me. I'm good on traffic. I understand traffic. I drive up there too, and it sucks. We did a terrible job. The city did a terrible job with it. But obsolete buildings, to me, is a stretch. I understand that you can have older buildings in town, and I think that's just true everywhere. But how would someone who owns some developer, a private person, a doctor, a practice, owns a building that may be 50, 60 years old, how does that impact the hospital itself?
Well, single practitioners don't have the synergies that are being looked for today in the sharing of things like technologies. Go to Northwest Specialty Hospital, for example, today, and look around and how many specialties are integrated in quite a large building. A lot of independent practitioners who are working in ways that that truly respond to the technologies of today and the expectations of the customers. Now, I think there are a lot of people very capable of going into that in detail, and I think it was touched on in your August 7th meeting with Kootenai Health. So it's a functional obsolescence. It's not that the building can't be used for something, but if it's going to be part of the growth of Kootenai Health and the other allied entities that are going to provide a 21st century kind of set of services, then we've got a problem. As I hear it, for example, a minimum kind of structure today would have at least 8 practitioners and 8,000 square feet. Well, where do you put that when you've laid out over the last 50, 60 years all of these single practitioner buildings that have lots of green space around them and lots of parking that's relatively inefficient compared to shared parking kinds of
So
systems?
you're talking about eliminating parking and green space? I mean, I'm still lost on this whole
I'm
thing.
talking about putting together some, I'm not trying to plan for you. I'm trying to say that the existing system of all these very small individual practitioners does not allow for further growth or via the densities what would necessarily have to be
sounds to
in
me like
order
you're-
for the campus to do what it's intending to do, to be a highly competitive regional medical
So
center.
you have the campus, that's KMC, and they are Kootenai Health, and they control their own campus, but we're talking about things outside of their campus. We're talking about
Absolutely,
individuals,
and
private
synergies.
property, commercial property, and apparently it's not meeting some centralized planner's idea of what the 21st century is supposed to be. So an obsolete building should be, you actually put it here, it's right up there, detrimental to public health and safety? That's a stretch. I mean, I can understand if there's a crack house, but you're talking about a business that employs people, that serves customers. And now you're telling me that it's detrimental to public health and
I
safety?
absolutely am, yes, sir. Let me give you an example.
That's nuts.
Well, we disagree.
You realize
I
I'm gonna
have-
vote up here.
Pardon me?
Never mind, go on.
I'm just respectfully sharing that my view is different based upon my personal experiences and professional ones. I have often seen communities losing this central asset, the community hospitals, all over the country. The numbers are there. There are only 88 independent community hospitals of this size left in the United States. You know, they're declining. Now, in my economic development work, I've seen a lot of industries on the decline. One is timber. I've worked a lot in timber. One is ranching. How about the family practitioner rancher in the United States? I was in Hawaii when the last sugarcane factory closed. There are lots of dynamics that are out there, and one of the most stereotypical is the loss of community hospitals. Now, this regional medical center has gone a different, that is, Kootenai Health has gone a different route. Through its synergies with other entities, to the best of its ability, it is building a regional medical center that right now is coming to a halt in its growth capacity. Now, it's either going to find ways to grow where it is, and we're saying from our findings that's going to be very, very tough, or it's going to start growing in new locations. And that's the issue. Why would it be a public health problem? Well, if it starts locating in the Rathdrum Prairie or other areas outside of here, then is that in the best interest of the customer, the patient of Coeur d'Alene? Being further away, less centralized? It's that kind of dynamic that I think is important. And again, based upon a lot of opinions. You've already heard from Urban Land Institute, you've heard from Kootenai Health, and you've heard from others that this growth in its current location can't continue. So if it goes someplace else, then what does that make it? Will it do what it might have done if it had all the synergies centrally developed?
Okay, well, you turned a corner there, but I'm going to say that detrimental to public health, that's not the way I read that sentence, but safety. So now talk about safety. So how does a private practitioner with his own parking lot and his own green space, and he doesn't have whatever the 8 practitioners in there, how does that impact public safety?
Well, on number 2, under unsafe conditions, the parentheses was circulation, and it's related to people moving through and within the corridor. So it's not, if I understand your point, it's not about an individual practitioner doing business. That's not the issue. The safety issue is related to transportation and circulation.
Obsolete buildings.
Pardon me. Yeah, all right, I'm with you. I thought you were referring to a comment you'd made just a little bit earlier. Well, I'll give you an example. Just the other day, just a little sidebar here, and then I'll make my example. This is a facility built for 32,000 services per year for emergency room. Its most recent numbers were 52,000. That's a safety issue.
But that's
And
the hospital, that's
I'm coming
not
to it.
obsolete building.
I'm coming to it. So in order for this facility to continue to do what it needs to do and have room for emergency services and so on, and other things that were highlighted in the document, that 250-yard circumference is another key issue. It's got to be able to have more densities. The obsolete buildings in low-density areas are counter to that interest of providing for the centralized growth that needs to be in this corridor.
So the hospital wants to take over those properties.
I think what I've heard, and you all have lived here much longer than me, what I've consistently heard is the interest of synergies, working with other healthcare providers, as well as being a dynamic player and even leader at Kootenai Health itself. But they would speak to that better than me.
Sounds more like obedience than synergy, but please continue.
Okay, lot layout. If you take a look at any map, for example, a Google map that shows lot lines, the lot layouts are very unusual here. It's one of the most unusual I've ever seen. They're sometimes very long, narrow, bent, makes access extremely difficult, and trying to, in a logical way, combined with diversity of property ownership, to assemble properties into a logical and usable development location is very, very tough. And I used an example of the northwest quadrant in the report, showing how many lot lines there are that are just almost unpredictable, and where they would go, and their ups and downs, ins and outs, lefts and rights. So combining obsolete buildings, lot layout, and the diversity of ownership, which, as you see, is 170 property owners for 287 parcels, it is hard to assemble properties.
And again, I'm going to disagree with you there. I think private property rights is really important in Idaho. I think 170 property owners have rights to their property. Hard to consolidate for who?
Consolidate for 21st century oriented.
Okay, that's an
medical
idea. I'm
services.
talking about an entity. Who is trying to consolidate these 170 properties?
Well, any number of entities, Kootenai Health would be one.
But wait, you're
private
right,
sector
you're writing
developers
this,
are
you're writing
others.
this at their direction. So does Kootenai Health want to consolidate 170 properties?
Oh, no, sir, I would never go that far. Then that's 287 parcels.
Oh, parcels.
I do believe they have an expectation and an interest that they've shown in the past of bringing together a number of parcels for their own purposes, but so do other entities as well.
And this is the only way to do it.
Well, that would be the purpose of a plan, an urban renewal plan, to identify what kinds of alternatives there would be. Again.
No, if you go to an urban renewal plan, then your only alternative is urban renewal. So I'm saying there's other alternatives other than urban renewal. You can pay people for property. That actually has been working for a while now.
Dan,
Excuse
if
me.
I could just interrupt for a quick second. Maybe we can I think we've all been where you're at, and I have notes all over, but maybe if he finishes it, then we can go back and kind of get it done, rather than kind of keep sticking him. Are you with me?
Yeah, I just don't know where we're going to go from here,
Well,
so.
let's just let him get done, and then we all have been grinding this. I was on the phone most of the day doing the same thing, going, what is, this doesn't make any sense, so.
Please, go ahead then.
Keek?
And I just wanted to clarify something, Dan, as you're talking about this, and also Woody, what we're talking about here is commencing and completing the preparation of an urban renewal plan, which may include revenue allocation provisions for all or part of the area. We're not voting on a border, we're not voting on whether this
But
statement
we
is correct or
are.
not.
I mean, I've been to this rodeo many times,
And
and this is
I appreciate
exactly
your
what we
passion
do.
for it, I really do. I think we all have passion for the facts, and I appreciate your civility in presenting them. But I want to be clear that I'm staying on topic, that this may include for all or part, and we are not voting on a plan. So I want to hear the rest of this information before I get too clouded in some sort of argumental discussion here on these minor incidents. So I appreciate that you'll be able to continue.
Well, I was elected to hold accountable, for accountability here, and so I'm going to practice that when I see it's necessary, and that is my prerogative. Thank
Indeed.
you for your input.
Indeed.
Thank you both for your comments there. I think it might help to clarify something. I don't think there's anything in the law, if I understood you correctly, that requires an urban renewal district to only use urban renewal funds. That would not be in any feasibility study that I would do. It is a tool.
That's the purpose of the law, is so that urban renewal uses urban renewal funds.
Urban renewal funds may be for a particular project within the urban renewal area, but a project is not the whole area, and there are multiple things that can and I'm sure will be done by any number of entities. This
I'll
would
cut
be
you
a
some
tool
slack,
that
'cause
would
you'll
be
be
part
here
of
a
a
little while.
collaboration of effort.
Please continue. I'm with Kiki. Let's hear the rest of this, please. So, sorry for the interruption.
That's quite all right. I appreciate your diligence. The next item is competitively disadvantaged due to proximity of an adjacent state. Imagine being at Kootenai Health or anywhere in the health corridor and dealing with the issues of competition from Spokane. It has a Spokane area, which is really a dramatic success story in regional medical centers, has a substantially lower cost of living, about 15% in a study I just saw on Google. It has no state income tax. It has K through 12 support at a much higher level of quality. That is, Idaho is around, well, being from Idaho, I always wince when I see how low we're rated. But one study I just looked into as part of this effort ranked Idaho 30th, and I think Washington was 12th in the study. You'll see that specifically. Higher wages are also a substantial issue that people in Idaho have to face. Those are anybody in the business of providing health care. So competitively disadvantaged seems to be right on the mark. Next item, sanitary sewer capacity. One of the concerns for the Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor is to be able to support a number of potentially large-scale developments. Some of the good news is that there are areas within the health corridor that appear to have the capacity to stay within that kind of 75% of total capacity area. But up in that the eastern northeast portion of the west half, that would be around Kootenai Health, there are some problems that were laid out in the eligibility report that refer to capacity under expectations for future growth. The last study that was done was by the city on sewer capacity was done in 2013, and it used a lower average output figure, ERUs they're called, than is most likely going to happen with development in and around the Kootenai Health Center. So it's pretty likely that sewage is, treatment and handling is going to be a substantial problem. The last item is a combination of the above factors. And there are any number of ways for those factors to join in together. You can imagine if you've got a weak circulation system, such as been identified, that's going to create safety issues for pedestrians, cyclists, and that's exactly what's going on. Lot layout and diversity of ownership is going to make it difficult to bring projects together. Competitively disadvantaged, obsolete buildings, lot layouts also can result in economic underdevelopment. Just straightforward findings that those combinations can make conditions even worse. So these conditions individually and collectively demonstrate to us that the deteriorating conditions that are called out and defined in state law meet that bar, meet those expectations. And we believe that this is a clear confirmation of eligibility to move, to pursue urban renewal. And with that, I'd be happy to take any further questions.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right. Dan, hold on for a sec. Amy, you got any questions?
I'm good for right now.
Okay. Dan? On boy? Kiki, go on.
Let me ask this question. Who's pushing for this?
Is that a question for me? Who's pushing it?
Well, I don't care who wants to answer, anybody.
Well, I think your community should respond to that. Our employer is Coeur d'Alene, CDA 2030. They have collaborated in terms of communication actively with Ignite CDA. We've been in constant communication with city staff and have received great guidance from them. So I would say those are the central, let's say, contacts that we have in direction, if that is helpful.
Well, the only thing is, you know, I've lived in this community for a long time. And I go up in that area quite a bit in the last few years. And I don't hear people saying that they want urban renewal up there. Have the residents in that area been notified, or are they interested in it? And a thing I want to ask Troy, if this area, and it's quite a big area, if it is put into urban renewal area, money-wise, tax dollars and stuff, how much are we going to lose as a city?
Great question, council member. The analysis for that hasn't been done because you haven't said to go forward. What we attempt to do is bring forward solutions to an area that is a large economic engine, as we've looked at. We look at some of the features that you've heard tonight. You're correlating them to benefits, which I compliment you on, because urban renewal is about public improvements. You know the city budget as well as anyone. You've been at it a few years, and we just don't have the funding to help with some of these public infrastructure improvements that this is looking at, one of which is that parking. We have a pretty good idea of what a parking garage would cost, and in so doing, if this is the wish of council, there's an opportunity for a way in which to help get it financed so that we can maximize those square feet that exist up there, rather than surface parking lots. Just as an example of a potential public benefit as we look to keep our largest employer. I would like to just take a moment to say that if we were attempting to recruit a Kootenai Health, we would be looking at every tool available. They are an engine that is doing very well, and we're very fortunate to have them here. So thanks to the effort that 2030 does, having Ignite as an urban renewal agency and a number of successes, it was just time to bring this forward and put these experts to work on this.
Counselor, may I address your question with regard to residences? I appreciate the comment on that issue. Let me speak to it for a moment as an observer, what I see on the site. I've been there a lot lately and looking at it. And what I see on Davidson and on Emma is a degree of the chaos of the invisible hand of capitalism without a vision. And among other things, there are people who are building by buying one or two lots, putting them together, and building much higher value homes. There are other people who are renovating their existing homes, and they're lower moderate income people who are devoted to their properties. And then there are other places that have already changed over to what look like private residences, and are becoming commercial activities already. There are a small number of locations that have become multifamily in the area. Now, I'm a capitalist. My background is in business, and I see that the invisible hand of capitalism might be just left alone. Let it go do its thing. But without a clear plan for that area, what is a homeowner to do? Or what is a renter to do? Is that my future? Right now, I don't think it's clear what the future of that area is. I wouldn't be sure what to do with my property. Should I buy it if I'm a renter? Should I improve it if I'm a homeowner? Should I buy next door and grow it? Or should I expect that it's definitely going to change? Now, one of the things that's, I believe, clear about the nature of a regional medical center, and certainly in the ones that I've worked with over the years, is they need housing for their employees and for people that are in the community. There's not a plan for that. An urban renewal plan could conceivably start to address what is the future of housing in that area. That's not our job in this task. We're right now just tasked with, is it eligible to pursue an urban renewal status and a plan that would eventually identify whether or not alternatives make social and economic sense. But today, I think it's difficult to be a resident in that area. I'm trying to be fair. I come from an area not too unlike that. I lived near Gritman Hospital in Moscow. It's growing, and I know coming out onto Washington now, it's getting to be more and more difficult, and more people trying to find new ways around the hospital district there. That circulation can pinch residential activities, but without a plan, it just will do what it will do.
Thanks. Keek? Go through yours.
This is gonna be Dan or me first, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have blabbed enough.
I'm saving Dan for the
Yes.
crescendo.
It's very Austrian of you.
Thank you. Tom, just as a matter of cleaning this up, your credentials again, and what has your involvement been in working on these plans or urban renewal districts? Would you just repeat that? You gave us a little brief.
Yes, ma'am. My education, I have a master's in international management focused on economic development. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Washington in urban planning with a focus on urban economic development. I've been 38 years in community planning, mostly as a consultant, and most of my clients have been in the public sector. I've most often been in that interface between the public and the private sector, working on public-private partnerships. I've worked extensively in the state of Idaho. Organizationally, I have served as an officer on the board of the Idaho Rural Partnership for many years. I was the board chair in the year 2000. I've been on the board of the Idaho Historic Planning Commission. I am community-oriented in that regard. I was on Moscow's Moscow's Arts Commission. I led the effort in Moscow for the 1912 building restoration, which I think is one of the great jewels of the community there. So a wide range of roles. I've been the executive director of 3 nonprofits over the years. One in Hilo, Hawaii, which is the Hilo Downtown Association and the Hilo Preservation Association. So that's 2, actually. There are 2 more in Waimea on the Big Island. And then I also, on behalf of the city, started and led the Ketchum, Idaho Community Development Corporation and served there a number of years. Randy Hall, the mayor, would be happy to provide you with, the previous mayor, I would be happy to provide you that.
I appreciate that. It just gives me a well-rounded, you're obviously passionate about cities and growth and planning.
And in Ketchum, we started, I led the effort to create the Urban Renewal Agency there, which has been very effective.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have 7 questions, and I'll go through them
Go,
quickly.
baby.
But is this, and if this is a question that, I mean, if you don't know, there may be somebody, it looks like, in the audience, in the group here that might know, but I'm going to, the independent hospital decline, and that's been mentioned before. And Kootenai Health, we're very proud of here. Its success is kind of a great Cinderella story. But I guess from a 30,000-foot view, what can you tell us about what if it did decline? What if we opted not to move forward to do anything to support this health corridor? I know that I've seen a lot of presentations from Kootenai Health on their successes, but also the conglomerates of other hospitals. So my question is, would they sell to someone else? How would that affect our community? And what is the positive for keeping an independent hospital here and growing?
I greatly appreciate the question, and you're really putting me on the spot.
Well, there's,
because I'm speculating about another
I told you you could call
entity.
from the bench, so.
Let me speculate with you in the context of analogy. Imagine competing with the Spokane complex, the hospitals that are there. What kind of densities do you see there? What kind of partnering do you see there? What kind of connections to the university or the college campuses there and the educational programs that are going on there? What kind of effort is being made on the part of the city of Spokane to make those areas work? They have awkward topography, and there are a number of things that are kind of similar there. But one thing's for sure, they have grown to the point where they've passed that transition from truly being a local community hospital to truly being a regional medical center. What I think I see here is that Kootenai Health has been extraordinarily successful by any measure I've ever seen. I mean, just look at the staff numbers that I've shared and look at how it's dealt with the tremendous constraints that it's had on things like emergency room operations, where it was built for 32,000 and it's serving 52,000 people. It's bumping into its limits now. But it's difficult for us as citizens to see it because, gee, hasn't it always been fine? Isn't it great? We always hear they're doing so well. But, it's like that bursting point that we're starting to hit. And the bursting point isn't just in terms of the growth of one entity like Kootenai Health. It's the collaborations, the synergies with other kinds of medical offices and medical programs, nonprofits, universities, colleges. North Idaho College, I would think, would be a big part of the future. I can tell you that education, on-the-job training is key, but it's not enough. We've got to have true partnerships for a place like that to work. And those things are coming together, but everything that I have heard says it's not altogether there yet. And if that's the case, and I'm just going to say if that's the case, let's speculate on that, but that's certainly all the evidence I see, that is the case, then what will happen next? Well, among other things, it could grow elsewhere. Do you want the jobs in Coeur d'Alene? Do you want all the private partners that would come into this and invest in medical office buildings? Do you want that in the Rathdrum Prairie or other kinds of places? Certainly we're seeing growth to the west as a specialty, as a significant factor. At one point, do they become a competitor, not just here, not just Spokane, but something somewhat close by? So I think we have to look at this in a very cautious, clear way. Let us think, what is the value of this Coeur d'Alene Health Corridor to the community socially, economically, in terms of your capacity to recruit? You talk a lot about recruitment. I've done a lot of recruitment myself over the years, and you know what recruiters, what potential clients usually say to me? They don't want to go to the next industry next door. They want to go see your schools, your hospitals, your public amenities, those things that make it a great place to be because they have to bring in employees. This is a big issue and a dangerous speculation. I hope that helps.
Good overview. I already talked about the traffic. I think I've got some time frame questions on how this works, but they may not be things. These are probably questions for Ignite Council on the steps that would happen once we move forward with approving, directing them to prepare the plan, what it may include. Then I've just got questions on the order of that plan coming back to all the different entities that have to approve it. So I don't know if that's one that you can answer or not. And is this process, the eligibility findings in that report automatically made part of the planning process for the plan which we're directing them to move forward with?
They would be evidence and available as any other information that's relevant to the process. But they would not, I think, beyond clarifying what are the eligible issues, they would not dictate the plan, if that's your question.
Okay. And then I think my others are basically on the formation of the plan, so I'll let Dan go ahead and see if they get answered in his round.
If I may, just one moment, we put in the report early on a list of the steps. It's on page 5 on how urban renewal districts are formed, and that came from Association of Idaho Cities. The state legislature in 2015 put together a special panel. I think it was 5 senators and 5 members of the House, to put together a document called Steps in the Creation of an Urban Renewal Agency. You may know the name Ryan Armbruster. He's an associate of mine. He is a legal specialist in urban renewal. He worked with the legislature at that time to help to lay out and make concise all those things that are in the law that are the things that must happen. And that's readily available, and I'd be happy to forward that to you.
Okay, I'm still looking at this question, and I'll tell you how it came in a conversation to me was if an urban renewal agency was not created and there wasn't this tool to support the growth in the corridor, in 25 years, what would the effect of that be on our community with regards to healthcare and the hospital? There's been, and had a conversation where someone said, well, one of the big hospitals will just buy it and they'll have enough money to buy the property they want. And that will be okay with the community. So those are things that I have rumbling in the back of my head and some of the source of some of my questions that I know may be on what your position in the eligibility report was. But I'm just still wrestling with that and how it affects the community. And then the traffic issues and the formations and all of that, I think those are all more part of the plan than they are for this eligibility report discussion, so.
It's difficult
you.
to segment, isn't it? So
Well, it
right
is.
now, just looking at the eligibility, it's, well, then what are we going to do? And I appreciate the challenge that you're addressing.
And for me, it's what is the crystal ball say if we don't do it? So I'm trying to answer those questions as well, just to be fair.
Yes, ma'am.
Dan,
Thank you, Mr. President.
be gentle.
Hanging in there, Tom?
Be civil.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Not
you.
gentle.
And again, I appreciate your candidness.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, too. You know, I can be on board with a lot of this, but there's some things that get in my way as far as urban renewal as the tool to fix it. We all support the hospital. We think it's great. I think everyone up here recognizes that that area needs more planning. I mean, it was just haphazard the way it happened. It was organic. And there are things that we can do to help fix it. So what's on my agenda is this the best tool to fix it? And it could be. It could be a good tool, because urban renewal is about infrastructure and things like fixing streets. But what sticks in my craw is the obsolete building thing, is buying property from people to consolidate property. And that's been a theme in this since the original report was given to us way back whenever it was, May or whenever, is they were talking about property consolidation. And that concerns me, because it means someone is going to be a bad guy. There's someone who owns private property, if it's a commercial building, if it's a residential building. And in this report, it talks about on page 18, which Susie mentioned in her public comments, it talks about price gougers and other property owners with inflated profit expectations. That's capitalism. And it seems like when it says, second paragraph, Kootenai Health and large-scale developers have both had great difficulty with price gougers and other property owners who have inflated property expectations. That's capitalism. You know, someone comes and they want to buy my property, we negotiate. That's the way it works. But what it sounds like is that they want to use urban, or whoever wants to use urban renewal as kind of the bad guy to come in here and buy the properties and do the consolidations and then sell that property to someone else who doesn't want to be the bad guy. And that's kind of where I would draw the line. And speaking of drawing the lines, if you brought that map up there again, and if that map were smaller, if it didn't include Davidson and it didn't include the residential area at the bottom, and it moved over, so right now it's a Government Way, if it moved over to 95, and it kind of tightened around the hospital, then it would be something that I could potentially support, because then we're talking about infrastructure, and we're talking about streets, and we're talking about sewers, and we're talking about that kind of 21st century stuff you were talking about, which is the communication and coordination of a larger campus. And that would be something that I could deal with, but I need to see more details before moving forward with that. I need to see a master plan, and I know maybe that's cart and horse type of thing, but that area needs attention. And this is one tool, not the tool. It's one tool that could be used to do it. But in the present presentation of the eligibility report, where we're talking about homes and businesses and they're getting in the way, I can't step on those people. I represent those people. And I can't see someone coming along, urban renewal in this case, coming along and saying, yeah, well, we're going to take your house. We'll pay you for it. We're not going to use eminent domain, because I don't think they're going to do that. But we're going to go ahead and take this and take this and take this and put it together and then sell it to that. No, 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 no. You know, I talked to Lynn Crosby, who is involved with Post Falls Urban Renewal. They don't do property at all. They just do infrastructure in the ground. That's how they do urban renewal. And we could do that here. We could fix the streets. We could put a bridge in there. We could do a master plan. I think that would be the direction I would prefer to take. But in the current status of this proposal, and I have tons of notes here, and I'm not going to go through them all, but with taking property, calling an older building obsolete. You know, my house was built in 1949. Woody, I'm sure your house was built in like 05 or 04. I know a lot of us in the older part of town, we live in obsolete buildings. These are not 21st century structures. In the report, it talked about building codes. We just upgraded City Hall to the current building codes. It cost us $2 million or something. You know, that's just an ongoing thing. I don't think that's really the purpose of urban renewal and fixing what's wrong with this area and helping the hospital meet their goals. I think we need to do that. But right now, this is just a little too big and too vague for me to want to support it in its current form. Just letting you know, FYI. But a lot of the stuff you rattled off, hey, I'm agreeing with it. It's that sewer. I'm going to disagree with you on sewer. Every time they rezone, they bring us sewer stuff. The sewer, I just talked to Mike Anderson, who's our wastewater superintendent back there, and the sewer capacity is fine for the hospital right now. But if you start rezoning things, C-17, and taking that residential and moving it up to higher capacity, yeah, we'll have a problem at that point in time. But right now, everything's fine. Still, urban renewal can be used to address that issue. I would just prefer it that if it was going to be in that area, that we were going to do the in-the-ground urban renewal kind of streets and that kind of infrastructure stuff as opposed to property. And I'm done.
Thank you.
May I respond?
Oh, sure.
Mr. President? Thank you for your thoughts and insights. I'd like to just touch very briefly on a number of your comments that might give you an even more comfort with what you're saying. Perhaps the best way to show this map would have been to have dotted lines. Those are unofficial boundaries. That is more or less the study area that is being looked at. Personally, I felt it was valuable, and I didn't have anything to do with the boundaries, but looking at it from Tom Hudson's point of view, I thought it was valuable to have Emma and Davidson included because I think it's important for the community, as Councilmember Ettinger mentioned, it's important for the community to consider the residents. And by doing this, it's considering the residents, as opposed to being just outside the boundary and not thinking about spillover impacts. Nevertheless, one of your options would be to identify modifications to the boundary. It's not hard and fast. Second item, obsolescence. I think one of the issues is being able to adapt to change. I'm an historic preservationist. My undergraduate degree is in archaeology. And I spent a lot of time in my life working on historic preservation, which is just why I lived in Hawaii with my family. I adaptively reused 30 different buildings just in downtown Hilo with the private sector. And what I have found is sometimes you can do it and sometimes you can't. There are lots and lots of buildings that I might have loved to keep, but eventually they become a museum of error, that they don't contain anything well. In the next century. So we have to make careful decisions. And as somebody who, I've won state and local awards. In Idaho, we call it the Orchid Award. I've won the Orchid Award for historic preservation work. So I'm sincere when I say I support your point about homes and housing and so on. But sometimes some places, they don't work as well. For example, on 4th and 3rd, there's still a number of residences there that are hanging on to being residences, but you can see more and more of them are becoming commercial, whether it's the existing building or they get taken out and they become something else. It would be a planning process, I think, that would help to identify what's the best way to move forward with that. Another key thing about housing is I had to pay a real premium to be a member of your community. And I think everybody who comes here these days does so with a bit of shock. So many of the people that you want to work in a Coeur d'Alene hospital health corridor are going to have those same kinds of challenges. Where do we live? Housing is an issue, and we can include it in planning or not. So I think that's a point to encourage. And last great point you made, right now things look fine. I think in a number of ways that's right on. But I have so often in my life been hired for people who just too late figured out they should have done it yesterday or last year or 3 years ago. One of the main things about buildings and infrastructure is they don't happen in a year. A long time ago, I had to get used to 3 to 5 year timeframes for doing infrastructure or housing or new buildings or whatever it happens to be. And in this case, right now, puts beads of sweat on my forehead. When I think we're okay right now, I want to look at, what does it really mean? Because those people who are making the future of that place, that corridor, work or not work, are having to think 3, 5, 10 years out. And they're going to have to make decisions very soon. And I think the collection of our findings is that you're coming to the end of your time to decide about the future of that location.
James.
Well, today, as we were studying and preparing for this evening, I stepped back for a while and came back to my notes and took a minute to think about what does Kootenai Health mean to me and how has it impacted my family or relatives or friends or coworkers. And one thing that stuck with me is 3 years ago, I had a heart procedure, totally unexpected, totally fine, but went to cardiologists throughout the Northwest region. And I landed on a cardiologist here in Coeur d'Alene and was able to have my procedure done in Coeur d'Alene, surrounded by physician friends, by all my family, by my council members, by the mayor, all there, my community to support me in my hometown. So that's not the decision that we're forced to make tonight or looking at, but I think it demonstrates the impact that a healthy, respected, quality health district has in our community. And I want that for my kids, I want it for the community, and I want it for future residents. So I'm going to support the motion in front of us tonight. Hopefully I'll make the motion here in a few moments. But I'd like to say, the burden is on the district, Ignite, and let's see what they come together with. Let's see the plan, let's see if it's financially feasible, and let's see if it really is what we anticipate and hope best for the community.
Dan?
Well, I've got a, not question, but I guess a few thoughts on this. And coincidentally, I guess today, late in the afternoon, was responding to the press, doing an article about the effects of growth and all of that. And, you know, in some of my response, I mentioned that, you know, my daytime gig, full-time gig, is the Director of Area Agency on Aging. And so I deal with a lot of this in a different way all the time. And my office is right there on the corner of Lakewood and Ironwood, and I happen to be native here, and so seeing it over the long term. And I guess one of my reactions is, why in the world wouldn't we want the hospital to, well, be here in the first place? Fortunate it is, and why in the world wouldn't we want it to stay and expand? Why would I want to have me or friends or citizens have to go someplace else to get medical care when we've got it? And we are, as it mentioned in the report, we're one of the fastest growing areas. We're also in that senior demographics. Our senior population is growing faster than other things, and so again, why in the world wouldn't we want to bolster our options and access? And there's so much already there. Now it looks, you know, going to have to make improvements, but another thought that just came up about in terms of, well, what if some big hospital came and bought it, whatever, what difference would that make? Well, right now we, to their credit, they haven't, you know, taken taxes for a long time, but that is an authentic taxing district with a board of trustees who are elected by the community and accountable to the community versus a for-profit thing where we're just one more part of the chain. So and then also just, I mean, as I look at it, and this is a step. And to me, it just seemed logical to take the next step, because some of the questions that Dan or anybody else wants answered, well, frankly, we can't give a answer until you actually look at some of the stuff and take a look at that. Urban renewal, my sense of it, and I've looked at it, you know, for a while. I mean, it's about kind of the short term, making some choices about short term versus the long term. And
yes, you come in, they created it, freezes taxing level, and so for whatever period of time, you focus those new revenues on that. And the decision that ultimately we would have to make is, in the long run, is that better off, to divert those for a period of time so that in the long run, it means more to the community. That's, that's, to me, that kind of what it boils down to, and we'll have to look at. But anyway, some of my reactions to some of that, but I'm also supportive of taking the next step so that we know what's up.
I don't know. Oh, well, I had a couple of thoughts here. I'm following where you guys are coming from. I guess I think of that area, I find it special. Having been here when I was younger, didn't spend much time there. Now, as I'm getting older, I have a tendency to cruise through there more often to visit people. I always thought it was special. I thought it was like the forest. They put this little town in forest and all these little funky buildings and then the hospital. I get the feeling, I think the pushback here is using urban renewal. Have they explored other ways to make this work? I'm all supportive of the hospital, and I guess I pick up on some of Dan's little comments about, I found myself going through this report last week and just feeling very defensive. What do you mean, what's wrong with our streets? What's wrong with the old houses? What's wrong with the curve? The S curve is a bad thing. No, it's cool. It's cool. But I get it. I get it from that 21st century because I'm not going to be here for that. But we are the future. We try and help with the future. I think we're on the right track. I guess the reality is the way I read this thing that we're exposed to do tonight kind of sets it in motion. And I don't know if we're all ready for the motion to set it in motion. So I guess my question would be, after you're done, is to bring up the urban renewal girl, the attorney that can address what we're going to say about urban renewal, right? What is the process from here? That help? So we all feel better now. Thanks for listening. And you did a good job.
Thank you.
You're
It's a privilege to be
bulletproof.
with you, and I feel your pain. This is a difficult one. And Councilor Ettinger, I'm, being fifth generation, I got a lot of family, young and old, and we talk about housing all the time in Idaho these days. I appreciate your advocacy for that.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh, pardon me.
I don't think I need it anyway.
So Dan, can you tell us kind of what this says? I'm reading it one way and thinking something, and I'm hearing it not necessarily that way.
Well, so the intent of the resolution as it's currently drafted is to make the determination that's required that the city make before any further planning on this area can be conducted and funded by the Urban Renewal Agency, and that's in 2008. And there's a requirement that the city council find, or the municipal entity that's creating the urban renewal district or considering creating an urban renewal district, make a finding that the property in the area is deteriorated or deteriorating. So that's what the eligibility report was about. Making a finding, or doing an analysis and then making findings about whether that area is deteriorated or deteriorating. So that's the main thing that's happening tonight. You making that finding that you agree with at least one of the findings that Tom provided in his report. Maybe it's traffic, maybe it's, multiple owners, maybe it's, not the right types of uses for those projects. Whatever it is, you only have to make one finding to have it meet the definition of deteriorated or deteriorating, but that is the first step in the process in considering an urban renewal district to be, for further planning to be undertaken.
So even though you use the word deteriorated, that's the big picture, and then it's what all these other things apply down below. The
Right.
traffic, the safety, the...
Right, so
Okay,
there's
that's-
definitions in the code, both in Title 50, Chapter 20 and Chapter 29 of deteriorated and deteriorating. Those are both attached to the study, what the things that are included. And what the study did was pull out the items that they found as being evidenced in that area as meeting the definition of deteriorating. So like I said, you really only need one of those. You just have to make a finding, that the traffic is inadequate, or, the flow, any of the items that were covered in the report.
Thanks. Any questions from?
Just my one traffic back to the red border. And I understand that that border is just for the eligibility study area. It's not guaranteed that's what the final plan border will be. But was traffic considered when drawing the red line to study?
Yes, absolutely, because that's one of the primary issues that people have raised as, causing trouble in that area. So traffic was included, including farther to the east and west was in part because of traffic reasons. But you're absolutely right, the boundaries are not set. When we're to undertake the feasibility study or the eligibility study, you always want to go with the broader boundary. Because you have to the extent that you would want to add property to the district area that wasn't included in the eligibility report, a subsequent report would have to be undertaken. So it was intended to be broad and could be narrowed.
Good. Okay, thank you.
I have one more question. Do we contact all the property owners as this moves forward?
That isn't part of the urban renewal process, certainly at this point. If, to the extent that it were to move forward, all the public hearings are noticed in the paper and posted on the website and the city's website. But property owners aren't individually noticed like they would be in, say, an LID.
Okay, because I know Midtown did not, downtown did not, right? Okay. Anything else?
I got one more.
Go ahead.
Danielle, while you're here, thank you. Does an urban and rural plan, when this comes forward, I know that it has to consider other plans within the municipality, but to what degree?
So the total in urban renewal districts combined cannot exceed 10% of the total tax assessed value of the city. And with this plan, even with the Lake District in place, it's well below that. Tony said something in the 5% range. But that's where you have to look at everything in total and make sure you're not above that 10% valuation of the city.
And is that's considering the current urban renewal districts plus this one?
Right.
But not any others that may have been in discussion?
Right.
Okay.
But for example, when the Lake District rolls off in 2021, I think that goes down to like 1%.
Okay, thank you.
Dan?
Well, just to clarify on the funding, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but for folks who, may have a question about, well, yeah, what about the poor folks that are in there? I own a house in there, and then they create a new urban renewal district, and they're going to do all of this stuff. Are my taxes going to be at risk? But to the individual property owner, their tax bill won't look any different because of this, right?
Except to the extent that the district benefits their property and their value goes up.
Right.
Something else, if I could, that Hillary asked me to add and just to mention is that in talking about other avenues for funding, so part of the urban renewal plan is to analyze all different funding sources. It doesn't mean that all the money is going to come from tax increment. And we've done in a lot of urban renewal districts, and some of you have even seen this, lots of different funding sources, but we've included LIDs, we've included BIDs, business infrastructure districts. We've included the community development block grant funds to the extent they're available. There are also transportation grants with the Tiger. Hillary tells me they're now called build grants. There's also the possibility of new market tax credits. You're correct that the Kootenai Health does have the ability to bond, levy taxes and bond to build facilities. That could be included as part of the plan. Another option that we've talked about just in general is the possibility that other public entities, including Kootenai Health, could provide payment in lieu of taxes. So they could make an agreement to contribute funds that would go to facilitating these infrastructure projects that we contemplate, parking or traffic and sewer, et cetera, the things that have been identified and whatever would be identified when you're doing the actual master planning, which is when any projects would firm up. But so there are possibilities for Kootenai Health to participate and seek some of these other sources, which then become more likely when you have matching funds You know, so you're more eligible for these other grants, et cetera, when you have community participation.
Good point.
Dan, nothing?
Oh, wait for someone to make a motion and then I'll rant.
So, if we pass this tonight, it isn't set in stone.
No, the only action taken tonight is to declare that the area is eligible, that it meets the
okay,
definition of
just that it's
deteriorating, and it sends it to the Urban Renewal Agency to look at. But there's still quite a process, you know, the master planning process, which, as you guys understand, you know, when we went through this just recently with the Atlas District, there was participation, you know, there was a committee set up where the city had participation at the table, the agency had participation at the table, other interested stakeholders had participation at the table during the planning process, and then ultimately, when a plan is developed, it's brought first to planning and zoning and then back to the council. So nothing is set in stone at this time.
Okay, this could be, say, 6 months or a year down the road.
Absolutely, it would be.
I have one question. Who's paying? If it goes forward, who's paying?
If you forward it on to the agency with the determination that it's eligible, then the agency has the ability to spend funds to do planning.
All right, if there's no other questions, Ames?
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 18-065, approving the determination of an area within the city to be deteriorated or deteriorating as defined by Idaho Code 50-2189 and 50-29038, directing the Urban Renewal Agency of the City of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, doing business as Ignite CDA, to commence and complete the preparation of an urban renewal plan, which may include revenue allocation provisions for all or part of the area.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Dan?
No shock here, I won't support it. Two aspects of urban renewal: economically disadvantaged area. If you have a hospital paying people average of $60,000 a year, it's not economically disadvantaged. And it's not deteriorated or deteriorating if in the same report people are accused of price gouging. So my opinion is that the report did not prove what it set out to prove. And I gotta stick up for those people. They're gonna get squished like a bug with this thing.
Maybe we can make it gentle.
Yeah, LCDCB gentle, that'll be something I won't live to see.
Any other, guys? How about roll call, Ames?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
No.
English,
Yes.
Eddinger,
Yeah.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller.
Yes.
Move to call for a recess?
Thank you, guys. Take a little break, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, we are back in session, and we have a public hearing. This is a legislative hearing A-4-18, a proposed 4.992 acre annexation from county suburban to city R1 located at 7610 North Ramsey Road. The applicant is Lake City Baptist Church. And Hillary, you have a presentation for us.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So the request, as you stated, is a request for annexation with the R1 zoning. And the applicant, Gordon Dobler of Dobler Engineering, and owner Lake City Baptist Church. So I also wanted to provide a little background on this. They came forward to Planning Commission in November in conjunction with a request for a special use permit for religious assembly and community education. And so largely the reason for coming into the city is to connect a sewer service to continue the existing use as a church, but also to have the option to provide a private school on the site. And so that's why they had to do the two in conjunction. The special use permit was approved by the Planning Commission, but it would only go into effect if the annexation is approved by the City Council. And the R1 zoning is just kind of the least intense zoning that we have in the city, and that affects the availability. So if in the future the church doesn't exist and it's developed as residential, that would be a lower intensity, and so that would have to get zone changed. So they were kind of just protecting the surrounding neighborhood from other uses. There was a condition tied to the special use permit approval, and you can see that here on the screen. It's really just water. It's required for development anyway, but just requiring the double check valve assembly that would be required on the main domestic supply for any downstream connection.
Are they already hooked up to us, to our water?
That, I am not positive. I'm pitch hitting this evening. I'm sure the applicant can answer that. Or
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, so subject property is here. This is Ramsey Road, and this is Prairie. So subject property outlined here in yellow. This is Legacy Place subdivision to the south. We have the Exxon up here on this corner, and then the Daybreak coffee stand up here, and then some property, vacant property. And then this was recently annexed into the city and has a zone change as well for the R17 for some apartments that will be going in. So here's just a zoomed-in version. You can see the church facility there with some nice open space around it and some parking and a storage facility. Annexation exhibit, just a requirement to show you the legal boundaries of the area to be annexed. Subject property shown here with surrounding annexations that have taken place in the city, and the date is the last number on there. So this one was in 2016, this was our most recent in 2017, and then there's kind of a variety dating back into the 90s and early 2000s. Some site photos, just so you can kind of see the site, the existing church and surrounding uses. So this is looking east toward the existing church facility. This one is looking southeast at the church facility and their parking. This one is at the storage building and the parking area. This is looking from the subject property north toward Prairie Avenue. This one is looking from the subject property south toward the single-family neighborhood, the Legacy Place neighborhood. And this one is looking from the subject property west toward Ramsey Road. So R1, as I mentioned, it's really our lowest intensity residential zoning district. It allows for residential uses and then other things through special use permits, such as a church for special assembly and community education. So annexation, there's 4 findings, so I'll walk you through those. So the first one is B8, that this proposal is or is not in conformance with the comprehensive plan policies. And so this area is identified in the Ramsey Woodland, and it is contiguous to city limits. The property is noted here, and this black boundary is that Ramsey Woodland boundary. The green means it's in a transition area, and so those are areas that are subject to change, and they must be developed with care. So Ramsey Woodland today, kind of just talking about the mix of the subdivisions, a lot of residential use, some parks in the area. There are some residential uses to the west of Atlas Road, which is really not in this area. And then there are some neighborhood service nodes, so that could be similar to a church or a small school or some other kind of little convenience shops, things like that. Woodland, Ramsey Woodland tomorrow, it's, it's largely, it's going to kind of continue in those same uses. You'll see some changes, but it's going to be growing in a stable manner with some more residential and some more neighborhood nodes. The area will have kind of this lower density, 3 to 4 units per acre. There will be some higher pockets of higher density, as I noted, that area that will have the apartments. And then there is really kind of, we're trying to get more of the pedestrian and bike trails in the area, connectivity to the neighborhoods, parks, and then those neighborhood nodes. So as you'll see, there's a number of the comprehensive plan objectives on the screen. These are all outlined in the staff report starting on page 6. And many of these do really apply, especially this first one, water quality. So the purpose of this is connecting to city sewer. So that's really going to help with kind of the water quality and the protection of the aquifer. Community design in terms of discouraging sprawl, using existing infrastructure, some of the ones on efficiency, economic and workforce development if a school develops, or just being able to continue the church use to create those jobs, and compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods. Finding B9, that public facilities and utilities are or are not available and adequate for the proposed use. So as noted on here, the staff report really goes into detail, and this starts on page 7, but really none of the departments had any concerns. We have existing water and wastewater infrastructure right there in Ramsey. It's going to be an easy connection. A lot of the other issues are addressed at the time of building permit. So if they are going to build the school, then we'll address some of the stormwater and some of those other things. And fire as well, they address it at the time of any new building permits. Finding B10, that the physical characteristics of the site make or do not make it suitable for the request at this time. And as you saw the photos, it's really the church and the parking lot and the storage building with some nice trees, native landscaping out there, and surrounded by residential areas. So seems suitable for annexation in staff's opinion. Finding B11, that the proposal would or would not adversely affect surrounding neighborhood with regard to traffic, neighborhood character, and/or existing land uses. So like what I just mentioned, it really is a compatible use. It's an existing use. The applicant's not proposing any changes, just continuing the use and possibly providing for a private school. So finding B11 continued, just really talking about that this area, again, is compatible. There are a few county islands, but this is one of the things as a city we like to see when these properties come into the city. So we want to have less of those little donut holes or county islands. It's nice to bring them into the city, connect to the city's services, and have them pay the city taxes. And then also is noted that the special use permit that was approved, if the annexation is approved, that would allow for them to continue the use and expand. Traffic, there was indication by our city engineer, Chris Bosley, that this annexation would not adversely affect traffic along Ramsey. So again, just to kind of show you a little bit more context, so the subject property noted here, this yellow color is the residential existing uses here. We have the red is the commercial uses, and then this kind of beigey is more vacant. Subject property zoomed in with the existing zoning, so again, what we kind of talked about, the R5 is the residential density here. There's kind of a mix of the residential and then some commercial. So there are 2 items for consideration for the annexation agreement. One is from the building department, just saying prior to completion, I think is that what it should say, the applicant must address any outstanding code violations for the existing structures on site, if there were any. And then engineering, that there would be a requirement for 50 feet of right-of-way to be dedicated to the city. And that's east of the center line, so that all the right-of-way would line up with what's out there currently. So the city council must consider this request and make the appropriate findings to either approve, deny, or deny without prejudice. And that concludes my presentation.
Questions for Hillary? Woody?
Hillary, did I see that engineering is saying that they have to bring that old church up to code?
No, the building department, we just wanted to make sure, since the county, with what they did with not having their building code in place with the requirement for the building permits, if we're going to bring this into the city, if there were any outstanding code violations, we just want to have them brought into compliance. So I think this was probably done when the county was requiring the building permit. So we don't expect that there's any code violations. It's just a protective measure.
Wow. Okay.
We've had some other properties in the past where we had to do this
I
as
seem
well.
to remember that one, it was a house, like a little farm there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Hillary? All right, thank
Okay.
you. Now we will have a chance for the applicant to come up and present.
You told me it was going to be God.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I have a brief presentation. I just want to capture a few of the highlights.
Gordon, Renata is waving her finger at me,
Oh, yeah.
which usually means she would like to
No,
do
it's not.
something.
What?
Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Thank you. You'd think I'd remember that.
Keep you
Well,
honest,
whatever.
Gordon.
Okay, so a few of the highlights. Hillary pointed out that it is an island, and it's always advantageous to the city to bring that in. And the beauty about this annexation is that it comes with an existing use. They're not proposing any changes, so as far as, community character and fitting in, it's kind of a natural. It's been there for 20-plus years, and the city has actually grown around it. You might ask, why are we coming in as an R1 versus a C17 that wouldn't require a special use permit? And the answer is because the church doesn't see ever needing a C17 zone, period. So the R1 with the special use permit in their mind was the better fit. Should use ever change, of course, you would have the opportunity to address that with a zone change. And you've seen the staff report, there really isn't any impact. The use has been there for forever. I think Councilman Gookin asked about water. They're currently being served by Hayden Lake Irrigation District that has facilities in that area. Surrounded by city, or just a quick view of the site. You've seen some pictures, highlights. It's within the ACI, currently a county island. And in those cases, it is more efficient to annex them for police, fire. You guys have heard the arguments many times before. Provides for orderly and efficient expansion of the city, and it's consistent with the comp plan. It's really, infrastructure, you've heard that. It's all adequate, no impacts. That's really all I have.
Questions for Gordon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gordon, why are they doing this? I mean, this is a church, and they're not really developers, so what's the advantage to them to pay the annexation fees to be in the city?
Yeah, that's a great question, and here's the answer. They really do want to provide a private school, and they don't have the sewer capacity for it without sewer. It's plain and simple.
Okay. Because 5 acres and Panhandle Health won't let them put in anymore. All right. So it's sewer.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Gordon? Doesn't look like it at this time. I did have a question for Troy, and I know sometimes we expect you to be all-knowing, all-seeing, and so this is actually a water question. So we may have to get the answer to this later. But since you have talked to Terry Pickle, I assume you're an expert in water. So they are in the Hayden Water District, right? And as we annex these properties in that are still on the Hayden Water District, do they ever in the future come into Coeur d'Alene, or how is that going to work? I mean, what would happen if, so they're in the city of Coeur d'Alene, I know it's never going to happen, but something happened with the Hayden Water and District, and they went bankrupt, or I apologize, the Hayden Water District, that's not going to happen, but let's just say that there was some change there. What is the water's position on that? I know that was a long, drawn-out question, but.
No, thank you for letting me research that. We will require them to hook up to the city's system and provide water to them. That also gives us the availability to read the meter so we know what is happening as far as the sewer expenses for the church.
So they will become a city water customer?
They will.
And at any time anyone annexes into the city that was a Hayden customer, if they annex into the city of Coeur d'Alene, we will require them to hook into city water?
Almost. There are some areas that are protected by water districts just to the west of this, where the water is provided by a district that has that area. And then we work out an agreement with them so that they read the meters, and in the event that a customer chooses not to pay, we're able to turn the water off through that other district. But this one is not a territory that's protected.
So they will be, it will be Coeur d'Alene water?
Will that be holy water?
It could be. Could be. You've had quite a night, Dan. Okay, so We have a opportunity now. We will open up public testimony. There's no one on this list for public testimony. I don't imagine that there is anyone out there that wishes to give. Steve Wilson, any public testimony for me? No, I'm good. You're good. He's good. Okay. So at this point in time, we will close the public testimony portion of this, and we will look for council action.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead. Ron.
Go ahead, Ron.
Go ahead.
Okay, Dan, you
All
got
right,
it.
thank you, Ron. I would move to approve the A4-18, a proposed 4.992 acre annexation from county suburban to city R1 located at 7610 North Ramsey Road. Applicant Lake City Baptist Church, and to direct staff to negotiate an annexation agreement and to develop the necessary findings and order.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on this?
I just have,
Kiki?
can I just ask Hillary one question here on the traffic? When we pull the annexation in, we're annexing it as an R1, so we've determined by our engineer that the traffic isn't an issue. But is the special use permit, if it becomes a school, will it address traffic separately within that permit and the annexation agreement?
He addressed that with the special use permit that went forward to planning commission, and there was no concern with that either.
Okay, I'm just curious because of
It's
this.
really going to be a small private school,
Okay.
and Ramsey is more than adequate to
And
handle.
there's other
that
schools on there, so good. I just wanted to see if that was addressed. Thanks.
Great question, thanks.
All right. Any other further discussion? If not, roll call, please. Renata?
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes?
Eddinger,
Yep.
Evans,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Motion carried.
I'd
To
move
adjourn.
to adjourn and have a Merry Christmas.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
I agree with the Merry Christmas part.
Merry Christmas.
We are adjourned.
See you next year.